$5,000. That was the price my own mother paid to destroy my family. The words come out of my mouth like shattered glass, each syllable cutting through the silence of the early morning, while Gabriel observes me with those blue eyes that once shone with happiness and now only reflect the pain of someone who was betrayed by the person who should protect him. $5,000. Less than we spent on Leonardo's 10th birthday party. Less than our used car is worth. Less than a veterinary surgery costs. That was the value she calculated for our total destruction. My own blood planned my annihilation, Gabriel. I heard every poisonous word, every calculated confession, every macabre detail of how you would be publicly crucified while I would be buried as just another medical statistic. My mother, the woman who gave birth to me and should protect me with her own life, bought my complete ruin for the price of a used car. When I discovered that my own mother had meticulously orchestrated the fraudulent falsification of my 10-year-old son's DNA test, corrupting entire medical systems and manipulating official documents with the surgical precision of an experienced criminal, bribing renowned professionals to systematically convince our entire extended family that Leonardo didn't carry even a drop of our ancestral blood. All this because her soul was completely poisoned by the most primitive racial prejudice and couldn't psychologically accept that my husband was a black man with dark skin and humble origins. I felt as if the solid ground under my feet had instantly disintegrated and transformed into a treacherous quicksand trap, mercilessly swallowing not only my absolute trust in the woman who brought me into the world with pain and sacrifice, but also my entire fundamental understanding of the apparently non-existent limits of human cruelty when systematically fed by the deepest racial hatred and visceral rejection of the different. It was as if a devastating emotional earthquake had shaken all the foundations of my existence, leaving only smoldering ruins where before existed an apparently solid family built over decades of love and mutual trust. The morning of that fateful Tuesday began exactly like all the other mornings of the last 5 years since we had definitively established ourselves in that cozy and carefully decorated house in the middle-class residential neighborhood. It was an elegant 2-story construction with modern architecture, painted in a soft beige tone that harmonized perfectly with the other residences on the street, surrounded by a lush front garden where Leonardo used to play cheerfully with Rex, the golden Labrador from the retired neighbors next door, in an atmosphere of suburban tranquility that completely masked the human dramas that unfolded behind the flowered curtains and impeccable facades. The tree-lined street was flanked by similar houses where apparently normal and functional families lived their apparently simple and predictable lives, following routines established for years, without even imagining in their wildest fantasies that behind the white lace curtains of house number 47 unfolded a Shakespearean drama that would brutally test all known limits of family love, blood loyalty, and human resistance to the deepest emotional suffering. The imported digital alarm clock emitted its strident and metallic sound punctually at 6:30 in the morning, cutting through the morning silence like a sharp blade that tears the delicate fabric of dreams, immediately followed by the familiar domestic chaos of school mornings that repeated religiously from Monday to Friday. The characteristic noise of small bare feet running carelessly through the waxed wooden corridors that Gabriel had polished the previous weekend. The comforting sound of hot shower water mixing harmoniously with Leonardo's sleepy but melodious voice, humming off key a children's song he had learned at school and couldn't get out of his head for 3 days. The familiar and welcoming aroma of fresh coffee being carefully prepared in the modern kitchen, gradually spreading throughout the entire house like a comforting morning embrace that warmed not only the body, but also the heart of whoever breathed that homey essence of domestic happiness. Leonardo, my precious 10-year-old boy who carried in his bright green eyes the same insatiable curiosity and thirst for knowledge that I had exactly at his age, was sitting comfortably at the rectangular solid wood table in the kitchen, swinging his restless legs while drinking his morning coffee with milk in his favorite mug. The one decorated with colorful drawings of prehistoric dinosaurs that was already visibly faded from so much daily use, but which he absolutely refused to abandon, claiming it brought luck on math tests. When I distinctly heard my mother's unmistakable voice echoing through the living room with a low and conspiratorial tone that immediately activated all my maternal instincts to maximum alert, like a silent alarm that goes off in an experienced mother's mind when something isn't completely right in the family environment. Donna Conceição, the authoritarian 60-year-old woman who had always meticulously controlled every microscopic aspect of our family life with an iron fist skillfully disguised as genuine maternal concern, was evidently on the phone conversing with someone in a conspiratorial urgency that immediately made the hair on my arm stand up defensively. even before I could consciously process through reason what my ears were capturing, and my instinct was interpreting as profoundly dangerous. It was a primitive and animal sensation, as if some internal family self-preservation sensor had been activated by a signal of imminent danger that I still couldn't rationally identify, but that my maternal subconscious had already detected with the precision of a highly calibrated emotional radar. She firmly believed that I was still upstairs meticulously preparing for another routine day at the accounting office where I had worked for 8 consecutive years, following with military discipline the same morning routine I had always religiously fulfilled since we began our conjugal life. Quick but invigorating shower, subtle makeup carefully applied to enhance features without excess, conservative social clothes carefully selected to not attract unnecessary attention in the masculine corporate environment, where I constantly needed to prove my professional competence. Brown hair tied in a low and elegant bun when I was emotionally tense, exactly as it was that specific morning. Although I still couldn't consciously identify the source of anxiety that had been consuming me since the moment I woke up with an indefinable feeling that something was about to drastically change in our lives. But fate, or perhaps some primordial and ancestral intuition that mothers naturally develop over generations to instinctively protect their families from the most diverse dangers, had impelled me to silently descend the varnished wooden staircase that Gabriel had carefully installed when we moved to that house 5 years ago, each known step being strategically avoided with the care of someone who doesn't want their presence to be detected, stepping only on the edges where the wood didn't creak under body weight. My initial intention was absolutely innocent and prosaic, simply to get a glass of cold water from the refrigerator to relieve the morning thirst that always accompanied me upon waking, an action so routine and insignificant that I could never imagine it would become the watershed moment that would definitively separate my life into 2 distinct phases, the before and after of the discovery that would forever destroy my perception of my own family. Dr. Roberto, you need to understand with absolute clarity that this is a matter of extreme family urgency. Yes, exactly. I urgently need you to completely redo that specific exam we discussed in detail last week. I heard her whisper on the phone with a low, controlled, and dangerously conspiratorial voice that literally made my blood instantly freeze in my veins, as if someone had injected liquid ice directly into my bloodstream. I'm referring specifically to that same exam of the boy Leonardo. I desperately need a completely different result this time, a definitive result that finally reveals and scientifically proves the absolute truth that we all already know intuitively. That he really isn't part of this family lineage of pure blood and respectable tradition that we built over generations with so much sacrifice and dedication. The tense pause that followed was filled exclusively by the deafening sound of my own heart beating violently against my ribs in an uncontrolled acceleration that made me genuinely fear she might hear the beats through the apparently solid walls of the house, like war drums echoing in a battle I didn't even know was being fought. Doctor, you must deeply understand the magnitude of how absolutely vital this is for the prosperous future of my daughter Marina, and especially my dear grandson. We simply cannot consciously allow them to continue living indefinitely this degrading and destructive lie. That dark-skinned man should never have managed to infiltrate and become part of our traditional and respectable family. Each cruel word that methodically came from my mother's lips was like a brutal punch to the stomach, making me involuntarily double over my body while desperately leaning against the cold kitchen wall to avoid pathetically collapsing right there on the cold ceramic floor, like a wounded animal seeking support to avoid dying. It was as if each poisonous syllable was a precise stab to the heart of everything I believed about family love, maternal loyalty, and the sacred bonds that supposedly link mothers and daughters in an eternal and unbreakable alliance. Finally, I understood, with a brutal and painful clarity that cut like glass, what had really happened exactly 3 months ago, when she had apparently innocently suggested, with that honeyed and concerned voice she always strategically used when plotting something meticulously planned, that we do a DNA test on Leonardo, just out of healthy genealogical curiosity, so the innocent child would know more details about his rich family heritage and could be proud of his ancestral roots. For 92 absolutely terrible days, I had obsessively counted each one of them on the kitchen calendar, marking with a red X each day that passed without solution. Our family had been systematically and coldly destroyed by a lie so elaborate, cruel, and perfectly orchestrated that not even in my most paranoid fantasies about family manipulation and betrayal could I ever have imagined that someone would be capable of architecting such a sophisticated and devastating revenge against their own relatives. It was a conspiracy worthy of a psychological thriller movie, but it was happening in my living room, executed by the woman who gave birth to me and who theoretically should die for me. The supposed official result of the exam had arrived on a particularly rainy and melancholic March morning, delivered personally by Dr. Roberto himself, wearing a dark suit and a carefully rehearsed expression of professional solemnity that at the naive time I interpreted as simple routine medical professionalism, but that I now realized had been the palpable moral discomfort of someone consciously participating in medical fraud that he knew perfectly well was morally indefensible and legally criminal. The fraudulent document was printed on official letterhead from a respectable city clinic, meticulously sealed with all the necessary stamps to appear absolutely legitimate to the eyes of any ordinary person, categorically declaring without room for doubt that Gabriel was not Leonardo's biological father, a lie so well constructed that even I, who intimately knew the truth about my own sex life, momentarily questioned my own mental sanity. The completely fabricated revelation had instantly triggered a matrimonial crisis so deep and devastating that it dangerously reached the critical point of definitively and irreversibly ending a solid 12-year marriage, patiently built on apparently unshakable foundations of genuine love, absolute mutual trust, and deep respect for each other's character. Endless nights that cruelly extended until dawn were systematically filled with heated and painful discussions where Gabriel, with his deep blue eyes irreparably hurt by the supposed conjugal betrayal, insistently confronted me with devastating questions that I simply couldn't answer satisfactorily, because I genuinely didn't understand how it was humanly possible for the exam to be correct, when I knew, with absolute maternal and conjugal certainty, engraved in the most intimate part of my heart, that he was the only man I had been intimate with during the entire critical period of Leonardo's conception. Gabriel, the extraordinary man I loved deeply and unconditionally since our first chance encounter in a university cafe, and who had always been an absolutely exemplary and dedicated father to Leonardo, going so far as to cancel important professional commitments to not miss school presentations or children's soccer games, had temporarily moved to his younger brother Carlos's modest house in a working-class neighborhood on the other side of town, claiming with a voice choked with emotion that he desperately needed time and physical space to mentally process the immeasurable magnitude of the betrayal he sincerely believed he had suffered from the woman in whom he had deposited all his trust and love. During the 2 interminable weeks that followed his devastating departure, I spent literally every night completely sleepless in our king-size bed that had suddenly become vast, cold, and lonely as an Arctic desert abandoned by the gods, obsessively turning over in my mind every microscopic moment of our conjugal life, every intimate conversation, every affectionate gesture, every promise of eternal love. Dr. Roberto, you must instinctively understand that what I'm requesting is exclusively for the supreme good of our entire traditional family, isn't it? My mother continued with an icy conviction that completely chilled me. That colored man was never truly suitable for my daughter Marina. Any person with functioning eyes and a minimum of social sensitivity can perceive this immediately. Now that we finally have a unique and definitive opportunity to use modern science to irrefutably prove that he's not the legitimate biological father of the boy, we can definitively free Marina from this completely inadequate and socially embarrassing relationship that only brings dishonor to our respectable family lineage. Dr. Roberto was evidently coldly negotiating the exact price for the illegal and unethical services my mother was requesting, with the naturalness of someone buying vegetables at the market. You can rest assured that money will never be an impediment to definitively resolve this complicated family situation once and for all, Doctor. $5,000 for the new completely falsified exam is a ridiculously small investment compared to the bright and prosperous future I'm strategically guaranteeing for my daughter, and especially for my precious grandson, who deserves to grow up in a truly adequate family, with adequate and traditional moral values, surrounded exclusively by adequate people of our social class and appropriate skin color. Hearing my own mother coldly negotiating the exact monetary price for the complete destruction of my family, as if she were buying an appliance at an end-of-year sale, provoked such violent and uncontrollable nausea that I had to firmly press a trembling hand against my mouth to physically prevent the sounds of my desperate sobs from alerting her to my unwanted presence and accidental discovery there at that moment of criminal conspiracy. It was like watching your own mother selling her soul to the devil, negotiating the price of family betrayal with the same coldness she would discuss the value of a used car. When I finally managed to force my completely trembling legs, almost paralyzed by emotional shock, to carry me stumbling away from that cursed place, where I had involuntarily spied on the phone conversation that would radically and permanently change our family life forever. I went up the wooden stairs silently like a ghost, hermetically locked the door of my matrimonial bedroom, and completely collapsed in uncontrollable tears, sobbing with an intensity that shook my entire body as if I were having emotional convulsions. I grabbed my cell phone with fingers that could barely hold the device due to the uncontrollable tremor caused by shock, and dialed Gabriel's number with my heart racing at dangerous speed. "Gabriel, my love, can you talk urgently now? I desperately need you to listen to me with absolute attention because I just discovered something absolutely terrible and shocking about that damn DNA test," I managed to say quickly, my voice coming out completely choked by tears that wouldn't stop streaming down my face like two waterfalls of pain. "It's absolutely nothing like what you're thinking or imagining. It's infinitely worse than anything our minds can conceive. Gabriel, listen carefully. My mother deliberately forged the entire exam. I just heard her on the phone methodically arranging with a completely corrupt doctor to criminally falsify a second result. She paid exactly $5,000 in cash to systematically destroy our family. You are, and always have been, Leonardo's legitimate biological father. Always have been and always will be for the rest of eternity. And we were all innocent victims of the worst family manipulation anyone could imagine in their most sadistic fantasies, motivated exclusively by the purest, most primitive, and repugnant racism." Gabriel arrived home exactly 32 timed minutes after our desperate phone conversation, driving at a speed that probably violated several urban limits. When I finally saw the familiar headlights of his black Civic illuminating our garage like two bright eyes in the darkness, I ran to the front door with my heart beating like war drums in an epic battle, stumbling over my own feet in the rush to reach him. We embraced in the entrance hall like two shipwrecked people who had miraculously survived a devastating storm in the middle of the ocean, holding each other as if our lives depended on that physical contact to confirm we were still alive and together. Leonardo, who was innocently playing in the living room with his superhero action figures, ran to us with that pure and contagious energy that only children can maintain even in the most confusing moments. "Daddy, Daddy, you came back home? You're never going away again, are you?" he asked with devastating innocence that almost made me collapse in tears again. "No, my beloved son. Daddy is never going away again in his life," Gabriel responded with a voice deeply choked with accumulated emotion, kneeling on the floor to be at the height of the boy's green eyes. There was a very, very big misunderstanding between the adults, but now everything is completely clarified forever. You are always my true son. You will always be my son for the rest of my life and beyond. Gabriel and I exchanged those looks loaded with meaning over Leonardo's innocent head, that specific type of silent and telepathic communication that couples naturally develop after years living together, sharing joys, sorrows, fears, and hopes. Both of us instinctively knew we needed to confront my mother immediately, but in an absolutely strategic and careful way to ensure she couldn't cowardly deny her criminal actions or try to destroy other evidence that might exist. We found my mother in the kitchen methodically preparing Sunday lunch with that meticulous and obsessive efficiency that had always characterized all her domestic activities since I could remember being a person. She was wearing a flowered apron over a perfectly ironed light blue blouse, her gray hair tied in a low and impeccable bun as always, completely oblivious to the devastating fact that her life was about to drastically change and that her crimes were finally being discovered. "Mom?" I began with a voice carefully modulated to not show the emotional storm devastating my interior, while discreetly activating the recording app on my cell phone. I've been talking at length with Gabriel about that Leonardo exam, and we're both genuinely concerned about some inconsistencies we noticed. During the next 15 tense minutes, we conducted an apparently innocent and casual conversation, but meticulously observing every micro-expression that crossed her aged face, every hesitation in her voice, every defensive gesture of her hands. When Gabriel diplomatically suggested doing a second DNA test at a different laboratory, I observed how her hands hesitated imperceptibly while peeling a potato, and how her shoulders stiffened defensively in an almost imperceptible way. It was exactly at this crucial moment that I decided to completely abandon our careful and diplomatic strategy, because my patience had reached its absolute limit, and I couldn't stand one more second of pretense. "Mom," I said with a voice firm as tempered steel, looking directly into her brown eyes, "I heard your entire phone conversation with Dr. Roberto this morning at exactly 7:15, when you naively thought I was still in the bedroom getting ready for work." The devastating effect of my words was immediate and cinematic. She became completely paralyzed like a statue, the potato peeling knife suspended in air, her brown eyes widening in an explosive mixture of pure panic, uncontrollable shock, and absolute terror of someone who had just been caught red-handed committing a crime. I heard you explicitly asking him to redo the exam with a completely different result from the true one, offering $5,000 in cash to criminally falsify an official medical document and destroy an entire family. Gabriel approached her with slow, deliberate, and threatening steps, like a predator circling its cornered prey. Dona Conchezon, did you really and consciously do this? Did you really pay dirty money to a completely corrupt doctor to forge a DNA test exclusively to try to separate us and systematically destroy our family for purely racist reasons? Finally, after a few eternal seconds of deadly silence, she exploded in a hysterical confession. Fine. Perfect. Yes, I did exactly that and would do it again if necessary. But you two are completely incapable of understanding that absolutely everything was done exclusively for the supreme good of all of us. Marina deserved something infinitely better than a degrading interracial marriage that would never be completely accepted by our civilized society and our respectable social circles. Every racist and poisonous word that mercilessly came from my own mother's mouth was like a precise stab to my already shattered heart, definitively confirming the worst fears I had silently nurtured for years about her true opinion of my marriage and about the man I had chosen to share my life with. Leonardo suddenly appeared at the kitchen entrance like an innocent angel, his green eyes confused and worried as he instinctively perceived the electric tension hanging in the air. Grandma, why are you saying ugly things about my daddy? He's the best daddy in the whole world, and I love him more than anything. Seeing my own mother look at my innocent son with calculated and inhuman coldness made me instantly make the most difficult and definitive decision of my adult life. Mom, I said with fierce determination that arose from the depths of my maternal soul, you are no longer welcome in this house or in our family's life. What you consciously did wasn't just cruel and inhuman. It was completely criminal, explicitly racist, and absolutely unforgivable by the standards of any civilized society. Gabriel determinedly approached the door and opened it wide, as if expelling a demon from our house. Dona Conchezon, please immediately remove yourself from our house and our lives. There's absolutely nothing more to be discussed or negotiated here. She left screaming, crying theatrical tears, and yelling dramatic accusations about filial ingratitude and disrespect for elders. You're going to regret this bitterly, Marina. When this impossible and doomed marriage completely collapses, you'll come crawling back begging my forgiveness. Her words echoed through the street like the maddened screams of a banshee. But each poisonous word and each empty threat only unequivocally confirmed that I was making the most correct decision of my existence, heroically protecting my precious family from a toxic and destructive influence that had almost completely annihilated us. The days that followed were exclusively dedicated to carefully repairing the deep emotional damage. Gabriel and I sat patiently with Leonardo and explained in completely age-appropriate terms that Grandma had told a very big and cruel lie that almost managed to separate our family forever, but that now we finally knew the absolute truth. Daddy, can I keep calling you Daddy forever and always? Leonardo asked with that devastating innocence that only children possess. Gabriel lifted him in his arms and hugged him tightly. You will always be my beloved son, Leonardo. Always and for all eternity. No matter what any evil person says or does, you are my boy forever. We also needed to strategically deal with the rest of the extended family. When I called Patricia to meticulously tell the entire shocking truth about the systematic falsification and the racist motivations behind it, my sister was in silent shock for several interminable minutes. Marina, are you really telling me that our own mother is capable of such calculated and inhuman cruelty? That she consciously destroyed your entire family out of pure primitive racism? Patricia's emotional reaction was a complex and painful psychological progression to watch. First, total incredulity and absolute denial of the reality I was presenting, then growing indignation, and finally a purifying rage that transformed into iron determination to do justice. How could I have been so completely blind all these years? How couldn't I perceive the evident signs of racism our mother subtly demonstrated? How could I unjustly criticize you and treat Gabriel coldly based on a fabricated racist lie? We immediately sought specialized legal help. Dr. Silva, our experienced family lawyer, received us in his elegant office lined with law books and meticulously guided us on how to proceed with the compelling evidence we possessed. This recording is more than sufficient proof for a solid criminal complaint of falsification of medical documents and active corruption, he explained seriously, adjusting his gold glasses while examining the technical details of the audio file. but you need to consciously decide whether you want to take this forward criminally through the judicial system or resolve it exclusively in the family sphere through social ostracism. We strategically decided to expose the complete truth to the entire extended family, but without criminally prosecuting our own mother. The devastating public humiliation and complete family ostracism would be sufficiently severe punishment for someone who had always prized so much her impeccable social image and respectable family reputation. During an extraordinarily tense family meeting specifically convened for this purpose, we methodically presented all the irrefutable evidence to uncles, cousins, in-laws, and close relatives. The collective reaction was absolute shock, immediately followed by unanimous indignation. My mother was systematically confronted from all sides, instantly losing the respect and unconditional support she had always considered guaranteed by the family. "How could you consciously do this to your own daughter?" asked my oldest uncle, visibly shaken with his voice trembling with contained emotion. "How could you use an innocent child as a pawn in such cruel and calculated racist revenge?" My mother desperately tried to defend herself with increasingly weak and despicable arguments, but her justifications sounded pathetic and completely unacceptable. "You simply can't understand. I just genuinely wanted the best for Marina." But no one else was willing to hear her empty excuses or tolerate her toxic presence. The social isolation was complete and definitive. Cousins, uncles, in-laws, nieces, everyone systematically distanced themselves from her, horrified by the discovery that they cordially coexisted with someone capable of such calculated cruelty against their own family. Months passed slowly. Gabriel and I did intensive couples therapy to adequately process the psychological trauma of the forced separation and completely rebuild the matrimonial trust shaken by lies. Leonardo also participated in some specialized sessions with an experienced child psychologist to carefully work through the emotional confusion of recent months and understand that he had done nothing wrong. We definitively moved cities at the end of that traumatic year, a complete and necessary fresh start, away from painful memories and family toxicity that had poisoned our existence. Gabriel got a substantial promotion that made the move even more attractive both emotionally and financially. In the new house, we deliberately created completely original family traditions of our own. Sacred Sunday pancakes with special ingredients, weekly cooperative game nights, elaborate gardening projects where Leonardo patiently learned about plants, flowers, and the cycle of life. We methodically built our own unique family identity, completely free from toxic external interference or negative influences. One memorable day, exactly 2 years after that devastating discovery, we received an unexpected letter from my mother. It was a tearful and desperate plea for forgiveness, claiming deep repentance and extreme loneliness that consumed her daily. She explicitly said she had lost absolutely everything: family, friends, social respect, dignity, and that she finally understood the catastrophic magnitude of what she had consciously done against her own relatives. Gabriel and I carefully read the letter together on a sunny afternoon. "What do you genuinely want to do with this?" he asked softly, holding my hand lovingly while we watched Leonardo play cheerfully in the garden with our new dog. I looked thoughtfully out the window, where our son ran freely through the green grass, laughing in that pure and carefree way that only children can maintain even after going through confusing situations. "Some emotional wounds are simply too deep to completely heal, Gabriel," I responded with serenity conquered through time and reflection. "She made conscious and deliberate choices that almost destroyed our family forever. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean forgetting or allowing toxicity back into our lives." I kept the letter in a drawer without responding, filing it along with other painful memories from the past. Not out of gratuitous cruelty, but for legitimate protection of our family peace. Some bridges, when burned by such extreme and unforgivable actions, simply shouldn't be rebuilt. Leonardo grew up strong, secure, and emotionally healthy, knowing exactly who he was and where his true identity came from. At 15, when studying basic genetics at school, he came to us with natural curiosity about that confusing time he vaguely remembered from childhood. We told the complete and age-appropriate truth, without omitting important details but adapting the language. "Dad," he said one afternoon, looking directly into Gabriel's penetrating blue eyes with impressive maturity, "thank you for never giving up on me, even when they tried to convince everyone that I wasn't really your biological son." "Leonardo, my beloved son," Gabriel responded with contained emotion. "Being a true father is absolutely nothing about DNA or laboratory tests. It's about unconditional love, constant presence, eternal commitment. You are my son in every sense that truly matters in life." Today, Exactly 20 years after that discovery that changed our lives, when Gabriel and I watched Leonardo with his own precious children, our dear grandchildren with bright green eyes and insatiable curiosity, we know with absolute certainty that we made all the right choices. We protected our family, preserved our fundamental values, and built a lasting legacy of genuine and authentic love. Sometimes I still receive sporadic news about my mother through distant relatives who maintain sporadic contact. She lives completely alone, isolated by her own destructive actions, daily carrying the heavy consequences of her racist and cruel choices. I feel a distant and melancholic sadness, but never regret for the decisions we made. Marina, Gabriel told me recently on a quiet afternoon, while we watched our grandchildren play cheerfully in the same garden where everything began decades ago, you literally saved our family when you had the courage to confront the truth, even though it was painful. We saved our family together, Gabriel, I lovingly corrected, intertwining our fingers with the naturalness of those who share an entire lifetime, united as it should always have been from the beginning. The true story of our family isn't about falsified DNA or cowardly racist manipulation. It's fundamentally about love that overcomes primitive prejudices, about truth that inevitably defeats elaborate lies, about moral courage to protect those we love unconditionally. And sometimes, to preserve and protect a healthy family, we need to have the necessary emotional strength to definitively cut the rotten and toxic branches that threaten to poison the entire family tree. Did you like Marina's emotional story? Then subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another incredible story waiting for you here on the screen. Click there and I'll wait for you.